The Indiana Fever has pulled off the upset of the season. And I told y'all earlier, bro, the Indiana Fever had a chance to do this.
The Indiana Fever shocked the basketball world with a playoff victory that nobody thought was possible. And they did it without Caitlin Clark on the floor. This wasn't just a win. It was a defiance of every prediction, every narrative, and every doubter who assumed their season was already over.
If they make it to the next round, Becky Hammond was already complaining about the format because she knows next round they could possibly see the Fever, and the Fever got momentum, guys. I told y'all, this momentum is a real thing. They have a chance to win it all this year without Caitlin Clark.
The Fever, written off as too battered and too inexperienced, proved that heart and resilience can outweigh missing stars.
Sophie's out. Half the damn roster got hurt this season.
Against the Atlanta Dream, a team expected to dominate, Indiana dug deep and showed the league what belief looks like when it turns into execution. Aaliyah Boston anchored the paint with unstoppable composure. Odyssey Sims ran the offense with veteran calm. Natasha Howard added toughness. Kelsey Mitchell found her rhythm.
Guys, this is just monumental for the team. They did this without Caitlin Clark. They have a lot of baggage on their back. They have a lot to fight for, and the fight keep fighting.
The WNBA playoffs are where reputations are built and legacies tested. And on this night, the Indiana Fever shattered expectations by toppling the Atlanta Dream. What makes this victory so monumental isn't just that Indiana advanced, it's how they did it. The Fever came in battered, missing Caitlin Clark and other key names, with critics predicting a swift exit. Instead, they played like a team that had nothing to lose, stripping the game down to its fundamentals and executing with precision when the pressure peaked.
Everybody else thought that they was going to lose today. And I told y'all, momentum is real. When you got momentum, you can beat a giant, bro. And that is what the Indiana Fever has done today.
For the first time in nearly a decade, Indiana wasn't just competing, they were dictating the pace, and Atlanta had no answers. From the opening minutes, the Dream tried to impose their will. Their game plan was clear: test Indiana's depth, force turnovers, and run the floor. But the Fever refused to take the bait.
And for the first time in 10 years, the Indiana Fever will be advancing to the damn semifinals.
Odyssey Sims settled her teammates into rhythm by controlling tempo and making smart reads in the half court. Every possession mattered. They worked the ball around until the right shot appeared, often leaning on Kelsey Mitchell's ability to hit from mid-range or attack off a closeout. This composure immediately unsettled Atlanta, who expected chaos but instead faced discipline. Defensively, Indiana turned the paint into a war zone. Aaliyah Boston, the anchor, battled through constant double teams and held her ground against bigger bodies. She didn't just defend, she dictated. Every time the Dream tried to push the ball inside, Boston either contested cleanly or forced a kickout.
That was the 6th-ranked team. They should have been number 2, number 3. We know what happened. Adversity. You overcome adversity and you get it done. They won this game in Atlanta. I told y'all earlier, Aaliyah Boston was going to have to be the difference maker. It was going to come down to Aaliyah Boston.
That alone disrupted Atlanta's usual flow. Natasha Howard added muscle alongside her, boxing out with ferocity and keeping possessions alive on the offensive end. With those two setting the tone, Indiana began to out-rebound, a team that had been favored to dominate the boards. The real shock came in the late stages. With the game hanging in the balance, the Fever leaned on role players who rose to the occasion. Lexi Hull, often overlooked during the regular season, delivered one of the defining plays of the night, a fearless drive to the rim that ended with a clutch layup. That bucket didn't just add points, it flipped momentum. Seconds later, Indiana found Boston in the post, and she buried the shot that sealed Atlanta's fate. Those two possessions perfectly illustrated the Fever's identity: unselfish, tough, and unwilling to crack under pressure.
And what did it come down to at the end? Aaliyah Boston. Had Aaliyah Boston not got that bucket over the top to get them to 87, we would have lost this damn game.
By the final buzzer, the Dream weren't just beaten, they were stunned. Analysts had painted this as a mismatch, a series Indiana had no business winning. Instead, The Fever left the court with their heads high, proving that adversity can forge the sharpest edge. 5 players hit double figures. The ball movement was crisp, and the defense suffocated Atlanta when it mattered most. This wasn't just an upset, it was a warning shot to the rest of the league. Indiana had proven that even without their star rookie, they could win by committee.
Guys, when the game is on the line, I'm not giving the ball to Kelsey. I'm sorry. And guess who they gave it to? They gave the ball to Lexi Hall to make the layup. And then guess who gave Aaliyah that damn pass? Lexi Hall. Lexi Hall ran the game to win the game.
Playoff basketball has a way of exposing weaknesses, and heading into this matchup, the Indiana Fever's biggest vulnerability seemed obvious. No Caitlin Clark. The rookie phenom had carried headlines all year. Yet here the Fever were, missing not only her, but also other vital contributors, facing a confident Atlanta Dream Team on their home floor. Everything about the setup screamed blowout. Instead, Indiana showed the league how to thrive under pressure by leaning into toughness, discipline, and trust in one another. From the jump, Atlanta tried to test Indiana's composure. Their defenders pressed full court through hard traps and dared the Fever to make mistakes. In seasons past, that kind of pressure might have unraveled them. But Odyssey Sims changed the story. A veteran who had seen every coverage in her career, she handled the ball with patience, breaking traps with smart passes and never letting the shot clock rattle her. Her steadiness set the tone. Rather than panicking, the Fever looked deliberate, and that composure was contagious. Kelsey Mitchell added another layer of calm. Known for her scoring, she chose her moments wisely, refusing to force bad shots. When defenders crowded her, she swung the ball. When the defense sagged, she attacked. Her discipline kept possessions efficient, which in turn kept Atlanta from running out in transition. That single choice, valuing each trip down the floor, Aaliyah Boston proved why she is already considered one of the most reliable young bigs in the league. Atlanta threw multiple bodies at her, but Boston embraced the contact, using her footwork and timing to carve out space. She didn't just score, she rebounded everything in sight, turning potential Atlanta stops into second-chance points. Her presence erased mistakes, giving teammates the freedom to play without fear of failure. Every time the Dream tried to shift momentum, Boston's work inside slowed them down. Natasha Howard amplified that toughness. Her scrappiness on the boards and ability to clean up loose balls kept Indiana alive in possessions that looked lost. On the defensive end, she made Atlanta's forwards work for every inch, closing driving lanes and forcing them into contested mid-range attempts. Those little plays rarely made the highlight reel, but they broke Atlanta's rhythm. And then there was Lexi Hall. She wasn't the focal point of the scouting report. Yet when the game tightened, she delivered. Her late-game layup was bold, fearless, and perfectly timed. It captured the essence of Indiana's night. Role players stepping into the spotlight when needed most by the time the final minutes ticked away. What had looked like a glaring weakness playing without their star had transformed into a source of strength. Indiana proved that pressure doesn't always crack a team. Momentum isn't something you can measure on a box score, but in this playoff upset, it was the single force that carried the Indiana Fever past the Atlanta Dream. Coming in as heavy underdogs, short-handed and missing Caitlin Clark, Indiana had no logical path to victory. Yet the moment they strung together a few defensive stops and converted on the other end, the energy began to shift. What started as a spark turned into a surge that Atlanta couldn't control. By the fourth quarter, momentum had completely tilted, and the Dream were left scrambling against a team that suddenly looked unstoppable. It began with defense. Indiana tightened their rotations, forcing Atlanta into rushed shots late in the clock. Odyssey Sims picked up the pace as floor general, reading where traps would come from and punishing them with sharp passes. Kelsey Mitchell, usually the scoring centerpiece, adjusted by spacing the floor and making smart cuts, keeping Atlanta's defense honest. Every small decision helped keep possessions alive, and every converted bucket chipped away at the Dream's early confidence. The Fever's bench and roll. Players bought into the wave of energy. Natasha Howard's hustle on the boards created second chances, and her ability to absorb contact without losing focus epitomized the team's grit. Aaliyah Boston, meanwhile, established herself inside, refusing to let Atlanta dictate the paint. Her rebounds became fuel for transition opportunities, and each successful trip down the court sent Indiana's sideline into a frenzy. Momentum isn't magic. It's built through hustle, and the Fever's relentless effort made the dream play tight. Lexi Hole's clutch layup in the closing minutes symbolized that momentum in its purest form. She wasn't the star name, but by attacking with confidence, she sent a message that every Fever player was ready to contribute. That one basket ignited the crowd and put Atlanta on their heels. Seconds later, Boston scored the go-ahead bucket off a clean interior feed, and the momentum that had been building all game crystallized into control. Atlanta, by contrast, looked rattled. They hesitated on open shots, overpassed when they had advantages, and struggled to keep their composure. Instead of dictating tempo, they were reacting, and Indiana seized every opportunity to capitalize. By the time the Dream tried to rally, the Fever's belief had already hardened. Momentum is often described as an invisible force, but in this game, it was visible in every detail. The way Indiana sprinted back on defense, the way their bench erupted after every bucket, the way players like Sims and Boston refused to let mistakes linger. The Dream were left chasing shadows, while the Fever looked like a team destined for something bigger. This win wasn't just about numbers or talent, it was about seizing momentum, and every playoff upset needs an anchor. And for the Indiana Fever, that anchor was Aaliyah Boston. While analysts focused on Caitlin Clark's absence, Boston became the undeniable centerpiece of Indiana's identity in their win over the Atlanta Dream. Her performance wasn't flashy in the way highlight reels demand, but it was relentless, calculated, and absolutely essential. Without her presence in the paint, Indiana never would have stood a chance. With her, they looked like a team capable of staring down giants. From the opening tip, Boston established herself physically. Atlanta tried to test her with double teams, hoping to push her out of position, but she absorbed contact, used her footwork, and forced the defense to collapse. Every time she drew extra defenders, it created lanes for cutters like Kelsey Mitchell or open looks for teammates on the perimeter. She wasn't just scoring, she was bending the Dream's entire defensive scheme. On the boards, Boston was dominant. Her timing turned contested rebounds into routine possessions for Indiana, and those extra chances became momentum builders. When she hauled in a defensive rebound, it gave Odyssey Sims the green light to push tempo. When she grabbed an offensive board, it deflated Atlanta's confidence by erasing what should have been a stop. The box score credited her with a double-double. But the true impact was in the way she controlled the flow of the game. The defining moment came late in the fourth quarter. With the Fever clinging to life, the ball went inside to Boston. Everyone in the arena knew the play was going through her, yet the Dream couldn't stop it. She pivoted, held her ground through contact, and dropped in the bucket that gave Indiana the lead. That single play wasn't just 2 points, it was a statement. The youngest star on the floor had just delivered the dagger against a veteran playoff team. Boston's influence extended far beyond scoring and rebounding. She set bone-crushing screens that freed her guards, directed traffic on defense, and gave her teammates the assurance that someone always had their back. When Atlanta tried to drive into the lane, Boston was there to contest. When a Fever guard got trapped, Boston presented herself as a safe outlet. That stability allowed Indiana to remain composed. Even when the Dream threw everything at them, what made Boston's night remarkable was her ability to balance patience with aggression. She didn't force bad shots, she didn't chase numbers, and she didn't let emotions dictate her play. She read the game possession by possession and executed exactly what Indiana needed. For a player still early in her career, that level of maturity was striking by the final buzzer. There was no question who had carried the Fever's backbone. Aaliyah Boston didn't just contribute, she imposed her will. Her presence gave Indiana the confidence to believe, and her clutch execution sealed the win. In a game where others doubted their chances, Boston reminded the league that the Fever's future and present rests firmly in her hands. In playoff basketball, stars may set the stage, but it's the supporting cast that often decides the ending. Against the Atlanta Dream, the Indiana Fever proved that championship-level resilience doesn't come from one or two players, it comes from everyone stepping into their role with confidence. With Caitlin Clark sidelined, the Fever's margin for error shrank dramatically. Yet it was the collective effort of veterans and role players that transformed a supposed mismatch into one of the biggest upsets of the season. Natasha Howard epitomized grit. Her defensive energy and rebounding gave Indiana second chances they desperately needed. Every time Atlanta thought they had secured a stop, Howard fought her way into position and extended the possession. She didn't just contribute points. She set the tone physically, crashing the glass and forcing the Dream to work harder for every rebound. Those extra efforts wore down Atlanta's bigs and shifted momentum toward Indiana. Odyssey. Sims brought the steadiness of a seasoned veteran. As the floor general, she orchestrated the Fever's offense with precision, reading Atlanta's traps and punishing them with sharp passes. When the game slowed down in the fourth quarter, it was Sims who kept the ball moving and made sure Indiana didn't get stuck in isolation plays. Her vision created opportunities that box scores don't capture, like threading the pass that set up Boston's late go-ahead bucket. Sims' leadership ensured the Fever never panicked. Even when the Dream tried to turn up the pressure, Kelsey Mitchell played a quieter but equally crucial role. Instead of forcing shots to prove herself as the team's primary scorer, she trusted the system. She took smart looks when they came, hitting timely jumpers that stalled Atlanta's runs. Mitchell's willingness to step back from the spotlight and focus on efficiency kept the offense balanced. That selflessness is rare in high-stakes moments, but it's exactly what the Fever needed to outlast their opponent. And then came Lexi Hull, the unexpected hero of the night. Late in the game, with the Fever needing a spark, Hull drove hard to the basket and converted a fearless layup. That moment electrified the team and the crowd, swinging momentum in Indiana's favor. Beyond that single highlight, Hull played scrappy defense, hustled for loose balls, and made herself available as a reliable option in the offense. Her composure in crunch time showed that no stage is too big when preparation meets opportunity. Together, this supporting cast didn't just complement Aaliyah Boston's dominance, they amplified it. Howard's muscle cleared space, Sims' leadership organized possessions, Mitchell's efficiency kept the offense steady, and Hull's fearlessness delivered in the clutch. By the end of the night, Atlanta wasn't just beaten by Boston's brilliance. They were undone by an Indiana roster where every player believed their contribution. Mattered. The Fever's upset victory reminded the league of a simple truth: depth wins in the postseason. Without Clark, Indiana leaned on the strength of their collective. And it was that unity, not just star power. What separated the Indiana Fever from the Atlanta Dream wasn't just execution or strategy, it was purpose. Every team says they play for one another, but for the Fever this season, those words became real. Injuries had stripped them of stars like Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham, leaving the roster short-handed at the worst possible time. On paper, that should have ended their playoff hopes before they began. Instead, those absences became fuel, giving Indiana a reason to fight with a unity and intensity Atlanta couldn't match. It was clear the Fever weren't only playing for a spot in the semifinals, they were playing for their fallen teammates. Each possession carried a different kind of weight, as if every rebound, every bucket, and every defensive stand honored those who couldn't suit up. Aaliyah Boston embodied that spirit, battling through double teams to keep her team alive in the paint. Natasha Howard's relentless work on the boards looked like a personal mission. Even Odyssey Sims, the steady hand at point guard, played with a fire that suggested she understood exactly what was on the line beyond the scoreboard. Moments throughout the game reflected this deeper cause. When Lexi Hull drove into traffic and converted her fearless layup, it wasn't just 2 points, it was proof that role players were ready to sacrifice everything to keep the season alive. When Sims zipped the pass to Boston for the go-ahead bucket, it felt like a culmination of a team refusing to fold despite every reason to. These weren't just plays, they were declarations of resilience, of carrying something bigger than themselves. Atlanta, by contrast, looked like they were playing for the next round. Indiana was playing for their season, their pride, and their teammates. That difference showed in the hustle stats. Indiana chased down every 50-50 ball, sprinted back in transition, and closed out on shooters with urgency. They refused to give an inch. Those intangibles aren't teachable in practice. They come from a cause that lives inside a locker room. Even off the court, the sense of unity was clear. Caitlin Clark, though sidelined, tweeted her support instantly after the win. Fever show, short, sharp, and telling. It reminded everyone watching that this wasn't a fractured team, but a family pulling together. Sophie Cunningham's absence was felt too, her reputation as the enforcer looming large as teammates played with her same edge. The Fever weren't just playing to win games. They were playing to embody the toughness of those who weren't able to be out there beside them. That cause turned into fuel when the game tightened. In the fourth quarter, where other teams might shrink, Indiana grew stronger. Every cut was sharper, every screen harder, every shot taken with conviction. They knew what they were fighting for, and it showed. The Fever's victory was more than basketball. It was about proving that when you play for something greater than yourself, no deficit, no injury, and no odds can truly hold you back. When the final buzzer sounded in Atlanta, the Indiana Fever didn't just win a game, they ended a drought that had defined the franchise for nearly a decade. The victory secured their first trip to the WNBA semifinals since 2015, a milestone that carried enormous emotional weight for the players, coaches, and long-suffering fans. For years, Indiana basketball had been synonymous with frustration. They were locked in rebuilding cycles, plagued by injuries, and constantly overlooked on the national stage. But in this single night, all of that history felt rewritten. The emotions were raw and unmistakable. Players embraced each other on the court, some in tears, others screaming in celebration. Aaliyah Boston, who had shouldered the pressure of being a franchise cornerstone so early in her career, smiled with the satisfaction of proving doubters wrong. Veterans like Odyssey Sims and Natasha Howard knew how rare opportunities like this can be, and they soaked in the moment. For Lexi Hull, whose fearless layup helped tip the game in Indiana's favor, it was a personal redemption story, proof that she belonged on this stage. For the fans, the night felt like vindication. Fever supporters had endured nearly 10 years of disappointment, sticking with the team through losing seasons and failed experiments. Many had begun to wonder if the franchise would ever return to relevance. Now, they were rewarded with a playoff moment that echoed the glory days of Tomika Catchings, who once embodied everything the Fever stood for: grit, toughness, and resilience. Watching this new generation fight through adversity to reclaim that spirit brought tears of pride to many who had waited so long. The significance of the victory extended beyond Indianapolis. For the WNBA itself, the Fever's run was a reminder of what makes playoff basketball magical. This wasn't a team stacked with all-stars or fully healthy talent. This was a team that had every excuse to fold, but refused to. Their win became a storyline bigger than the game itself, a rallying cry for underdogs everywhere, proof that belief and chemistry can topple even the most secure expectations. Inside the locker room, the historical weight wasn't lost on anyone. The younger players understood they were making history, while the veterans recognized they were seizing a moment that might never come again. Together, they felt the power of carrying not just themselves, but the legacy of an entire franchise. Every player contributed, and that collective ownership made the win even more meaningful. This wasn't just a step forward, it was a reawakening. The Fever weren't a forgotten franchise anymore. They weren't a footnote to the story of Caitlin Clark's rookie year. They were competitors, a group determined to carve their own chapter in WNBA history. And as they celebrated on Atlanta's floor, the weight of that history turned into fuel for the battles still to come. For Indiana, this was more than a playoff win. It was a reminder that no matter how long the drought, history always offers a chance at rebirth. With the upset of Atlanta behind them, the Indiana Fever suddenly found themselves in uncharted territory. For a team that hadn't sniffed this stage since 2015, the question immediately arose: could they actually push this miracle run all the way to a championship? On paper, the odds said no. Indiana was missing Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and other important pieces. They lacked the depth and veteran pedigree of the league's giants. But basketball isn't played on paper, and the Fever had already proved that expectations mean little once the ball is tipped. The case for Indiana's chances begins with their new identity. Aaliyah Boston is the backbone. Her presence in the paint ensures that no opponent can dominate the interior. Her scoring, rebounding, and composure under pressure give Indiana a go-to option in crunch time. Pair that with Odyssey Sims' veteran leadership at the point, and you have a foundation, steady enough to withstand postseason storms. Sims has the poise to manage tempo and the experience to keep teammates calm when the lights are brightest around them. The supporting cast has blossomed into a group that thrives in the moment. Natasha Howard provides muscle and relentless rebounding, erasing possessions opponents think they've won. Kelsey Mitchell adds scoring balance, hitting timely shots without forcing the issue. And Lexi Hull proved she can be clutch when it matters most. Her fearless layup against Atlanta serving as a reminder that no one in this lineup shies away from pressure. 5 players in double figures during the upset wasn't fluke, it was the template for how Indiana can compete with the league's elite. The Fever's greatest advantage isn't just personnel though, it's belief. They are playing for more than a bracket run. They are playing for injured teammates, for a fan base starved of success, and for a franchise desperate to remind the league that Indiana basketball still matters. That emotional fuel is powerful in the postseason. It pushes teams to dive for loose balls, fight through fatigue, and execute in moments where others crumble. Of course, challenges remain. Facing the likes of the Las Vegas Aces or New York Liberty means going toe-to-toe with rosters stacked with MVP-caliber talent and seasoned playoff warriors. Indiana will have to stay disciplined on defense, minimize turnovers, and continue finding scoring balance. One bad stretch could end their run, but that's what makes them so dangerous. They've already survived adversity far greater than any opponent can throw at them. The skeptics will continue to say no, pointing to injuries and inexperience. Yet those same skeptics said the dream would cruise past them, and we all saw what happened. Indiana has shown that when unity, toughness, and momentum collide, anything is possible. If they keep playing with the same purpose and composure, the Indiana Fever's victory over the Atlanta Dream was more than an upset. It was a turning point. A team that entered the playoffs battered and dismissed proved that resilience. Teamwork and belief can outweigh talent on paper. Without Caitlin Clark, they leaned on Aaliyah Boston's dominance, Odyssey Sims' leadership, Natasha Howard's toughness, Kelsey Mitchell's discipline, and Lexi Hull's fearlessness to rewrite the narrative. For the first time since 2015, the Fever are back in the semifinals, carrying the pride of a franchise that had nearly been forgotten. What makes this run so special isn't just the result, but the meaning. Indiana showed that they are no longer defined by absence or injury. They are defined by fight. Whether or not they win it all, this postseason has already stamped a new identity for the Fever, one built on unity, purpose, and the will to shock the league.